Good morning and welcome. I'd like to first of all start by introducing myself. My name is Ian Flanagan, an enterprise architect within the Dell Technologies group of families. I'd like to hark back to one of the points that JK made with regards to the use of data and the value of data in a South African context. And obviously from an Englishman's perspective, that relates to the World Cup. The data and the analytics capability of the Microsoft Azure AI services and machine learning allowed and assisted the Springboks in winning the World Cup. And it's true not just in rugby, but it's also true in the cycling events. It's true in F1 and McLaren from a Dell Technologies perspective. And it's also true with regards to business. The digital business is increasingly reliant upon data. The digital business of tomorrow and the IT transformations that businesses need to go through in using the Azure Stack and the Azure Cloud are going to drive and ensure that those companies who want to be within that 25% of the remaining, let's call it the South Africa S&P 500, need to use the data and use technologies as a means and a vehicle to survive in the next iteration of what business becomes. What I'd like to do over the next 30 minutes or so is to take some of those conversational points from Grant and from JK and talk to you about the hybridity of the Microsoft Azure environment from an on-premise stack perspective, as well as what that means from a multi-cloud and a multi-cloud management perspective. So, moving on. The new digital customer of today is increasingly young. The anticipation and expectation of our users today is to take our personal life and our personal abilities to integrate and interact with technology and apply that anywhere, anytime, and anyhow to our professional lives as well as to our personal lives, and the two becoming intertwined and integrated between the two. We expect intelligent applications. We expect intelligent data to feed how we are going to interact with our business, be that at a shop or within our enterprise workloads. And that increasingly places a demand both upon the securities of our enterprise, as well as the IT organizations who support our businesses in delivering those new applications, those innovative ways of working to an increasingly more demanding user base. The new IT environment needs to be something that is always on and always available. It needs to be fed by real-time analytics. Those decisions can be made as to when and how and best to apply patches to keep the environment safe. And then to make sure that the user experience and user expectation is managed in the same way inside an organization as it is on our personal environment, whereby applications, for instance, we know these from the updates of applications that we receive on our cell phones. Our experience is enhanced by 5 updates a week across 10 of our most important interactive user experienced applications. IT essentially needs to mature itself from where it's been over the last 20 years into something that is more attuned to a 24/7 by 365 always on means and mode of operation. And part of that is embracing the way in which new businesses are adopting cloud services, such as SaaS services. Salesforce.com would be an obvious example of that, as well as using the best-of-breed cloud environments, such as the Microsoft Azure cloud services, and possibly AWS and GCP, as well as all of the other plethora of cloud providers who are out there today who are providing a best-in-class service that organizations want to subscribe to. So it's being able to bring all of those experiences together and maintain and manage them as one. And that in itself talks to the need for a hybrid cloud, something that is seamless, the ability to create an application and extend that application to one or many different cloud footprints. And to write applications in such a way that they don't need extensive rewrite time, months potentially, or years in some instances, in order to get a new feature or a new function or a new application out into the user population, but also at the same time make sure that it is wrapped with the security that today's ever-increasing digital business requires. So the infrastructure, the applications, and the data, as well as the user experience, all need to be considered when a hybrid cloud architecture is defined and discussed. What we see from a Dell's Technologies perspective is that 93% of organizations will deploy a hybrid cloud or a cloud across multiple different locations. That's both on-premise, because we do see the on-premise footprint of a cloud environment as being obviously a logical extension to the cloud, as well as those multiple different endpoints themselves. From our experience and our conversations with the clients, overall we believe that an enterprise will consume 5 different clouds on average. Again, between those SaaS consume services to the IaaS, to the PaaS services, to the on-premise, as well as obviously having to make use and manage and maintain the current, I'm going to call it the mess of yesterday. But as we go forward, what does that multi-cloud environment mean? By 2021, 2022, the biggest issue that enterprises and IT organizations are going to face is how do you maintain and how do you manage those multi-cloud experiences? Not all clouds are made the same. Not all ways that you interact and integrate and build and secure those clouds are the same. And what we are doing, or what we're going to expect to see, is the complexity of yesterday without considered thought is just going to be replicated and duplicated into the cloud at a great deal more expense and a great deal more complexity. So thought and consideration should be given to the multi-cloud future within organizations. And part of that, ensuring simplicity or driving simplicity into an organization, which is certainly one of the aspects of IT that should be one of the first things to be thought about, is how do you drive that simplicity? And one of the ways of doing that is to have consistency of your on-premise data center, as well as consistency within the cloud. And that, from an Azure perspective, is achieved by using both the Azure services in the cloud, as obviously very well articulated by JK, as well as using the on-premise Azure Stack environment, which is using the self-same technologies, the same management portals to deliver and develop those application experiences within the organization. And why on-premise? Again, from the conversations we've had, 91% of our customer base believe that their cloud strategy is going to be inclusive of on-premise data center, whilst at the same time, 83% of the customers want that consistency of experience from the on-premise to the cloud. We've certainly seen the growth over the last few years of the Azure ecosystem. 54, 55, or 58, it's an ever-increasing number with regards to the number of regions that's been populated and expanded out from a Microsoft perspective. And that in itself is underpinned by hundreds of service providers and tens of thousands of enterprises who are wanting to consume those services that are available, both on the Azure cloud as well as a subset of those within the Azure Stack. And it's fair to say that although AWS is the cloud provider that everybody, let's say, aspires or thinks is where they want to be, the Azure cloud footprint is certainly on the ascent. And from a business perspective, probably the most well-described and easiest to be consumed. But what does it do? What's the requirements of building out this hybrid cloud strategy? We can't certainly ignore all of the technologies and the business applications that have driven and created the business to date, and being described here as the legacy of IT. Most organizations, as we say, have and want to become hybrid in their use of IT. But that means that there is a certain understanding of the data, an understanding of the applications, an understanding of how the business interacts with the applications and the data to determine what cloud strategy best suits that application. And it is down to an application. There is, again, no one answer or no one silver bullet that's going to be able to answer all of the enterprise's questions. We've tried to do that over previous iterations of technology. We know that it hasn't worked. So again, as JK made mention, there's various methods and means of understanding, from a refactor and reformatting to rewriting and repurposing an application, or just subscribing to it as a SaaS model, depending upon whether it's a replacement option or a migrate option, depending upon what the criticality of that application is to the organization. As made mention, if the application in itself does not define your organization, does not lead you to having something that allows accelerated growth, then subscribe to it. But at the same time, you also need to make sure that your legacy environment, Your mainframe environment, for instance, is maintained during this period of transition. Just to give you a case example from a South Africa context, I was recently speaking to a customer in the finance environment who have an application that's been in existence for 30 plus years on the mainframe, written in COBOL, yet coded in Afrikaans. It's a challenge and a half to think about how they are going to migrate and update and transform that application environment. Every year that goes on, the skill sets from a mainframe perspective on COBOL in South Africa becomes less. Yet the requirements of the business is such that they need to go into some form of transition. And some form of hybrid cloud environment is likely to be their exit point into that application transformation for both that application as well as that business strategy. So understanding this ability, this cloud model from a hybrid perspective is critical to defining what your cloud strategy is going forward. Remember, a cloud strategy in itself is there to offer flexibility to the business. It's not about a single place, it's about giving flexibility to the business to react to business pressures as and when the business demands, in a way that IT historically has not been able to do so. And again, this chart behind me talks about that modernization. What do you need to think about? How can you think about application modernization from the consumptive level all the way down to the legacy level? The percentages on the left in the green here talk about what the current percentages are of those cloud native applications, those new applications versus the legacy. And as we see, 90% are legacy orientated, whilst only 10% are likely to be cloud native. And depending upon that use case, that criticality of the data, the criticality of the business, then certain determinations can be made with regards to how to go about migrating it or modernizing it, such as to give life to the application going forward. So why Azure Stack and Azure Stack specifically in relation to the cloud, the Azure cloud? Well, the whole intent, as I've made mention, is to have consistency and commonality between your on-premise hybrid cloud footprint and your cloud consumptive layer on Azure. And again, from an application development perspective, this PaaS perspective, be it an IaaS or be it a PaaS application, means that application developers who are writing those new applications are able to do so in a way that allows the application to be consistent, irrespective of whether it resides in South Africa North or West or in Europe. Or admittedly, if it's written in such a way that as a PaaS platform, it can exist in an AWS or a GCP cloud as well and still give the consistency of development and the consistency of user experience as a cloud application. So the stack is that subset of the Azure cloud, but within in your data center. It allows IT services at the same time to become more a broker of service with a great deal more confidence. It allows IT operations to be more proactive as opposed to reactive in the delivery of services, being able to measure services, being able to describe and promote PaaS services such as the application developers are able to bring new code and new applications together. And by doing that and delivering it through a service catalog, then equally your end users are able to consume consistent services. And it's the consistency of service which is probably the more important one. After all, it's the consistency of service which has, over the last 5-10 years, allowed the BUs to go out and consume SaaS services because it is consumed in a consistent, costed manner. So we're able to bring that same experience to the infrastructure of today's organizations using the Azure Stack on Dell technologies. We've touched, both from Grant as well as JK, about what the hub allows you to do, the Azure Stack and the marketplace. So as application developers can go and select those application environments to deliver upon, develop on, depending upon what their personal preferences are. It could be going out and buying those piecemeal subscriptions. It may well be to go to, for instance, a Pivotal environment and subscribe to that on the Azure environment, which is a far more opinionated development environment. But it allows the developers to start developing applications far more rapidly. So flexibility and consistency. So what is the actual Microsoft Azure Stack Hub? As I made mention, it's the on-premise extension of the Azure cloud. And it's a designed approach. It's a built, engineered approach. As such, consider it to be a black box. It incorporates the software, the hardware, again, the services to both support it and to deploy it. It includes the networking. It includes the management console, the HMC console, where patches are downloaded to and then are deployed across the nodes. Essentially, it's purpose-built. It's purpose-built to be a representation of the Azure cloud within your data center. As I made mention, it's engineered. It's defined by Microsoft. This is what it needs to do. This is what it needs to encompass. And then a select number of OEMs have gone forward and partnered with Microsoft in creating that, of which Dell is one of those foremost partners. It's based upon a hyper-converged-based infrastructure, i.e. an ability to modularly grow the environment. So there is no excessive cost that is needing to be borne as and when an upgrade happens or as and when more capacity needs to be added to the stack itself. So that allows for a scale-out building block approach. And it has that Azure consistent management. It uses the Azure Resource Manager as the interaction point. That portal point on Azure is similar to the interaction and management portal point from an Azure Stack perspective. So from a Dell Technologies perspective, what does that see? It sees Dell EMC networking and Power Edge servers brought together. It sees that built on a hyper-converged-based architecture, and then the extensible services framework from Microsoft being able to be applied on top of that. It's managed through the ARM, the Azure Resource Manager, of which you can then subscribe to complementary services from Dell or from other partners that you may have a preference for. And then on top of that, the ability to go into and call down Azure services such as AI and machine learning. But please don't misunderstand me when I say that the Azure Stack is the Azure cloud on-premise. It's only a subset of the cloud services that are published. And again, I would very much encourage you to go to the Microsoft Azure site and do a search on Stack, and you can see what services are available to be deployed on the Stack. And again, as with the Azure cloud overall, this is an ever-increasing number of services that are able to be subscribed to and consumed. So what does its scale points? Scale points start off with 4 nodes, scaling up to 16 nodes. And they are now able to be incremented in increments of 1. From a physical perspective, again, we have different kinds of nodes themselves, from balanced scale units, which is very much a hybrid architecture, to all-flash scale units, to compute-heavy nodes. And again, I would encourage you, if you would, to go onto the Dell Technologies site and have a look at the exact configurations of what that means, or give me a shout from my email address, ian.flanagan@dell.com, and then we can have a conversation about the sizing and determining which is the right fit for you. For those organizations who, again, who are looking at getting into a potential development environment on Azure, we also have development nodes as well. And that's designed to say, well, this is the experience that you're likely to undergo when you come onto a stack and then you start to propagate workloads up into the Azure cloud. But understand again, because we are inextricably linked to the Azure cloud, it's important to understand that as Microsoft patches its own cloud on the Azure, it also needs to make sure that the Azure Stack within your data center is also patched to N-2 version as well. So your IS and IT departments need to be understanding that there are certain parameters of control that you may well be giving up in order to be compliant and consistent between your on-premise Azure experience as well as your Azure cloud experience. This chart behind me just talks to really the HCI market overall. It's not specific to the Microsoft Azure environment. But what we're saying here from a Dell Technologies perspective is that our credibility within the HCI market, that hyper-converged infrastructure market, is such that if we were to take our 3 largest or 3 closest competitors and stack their HCI revenues on top of each other, they still are not able to reach the revenue levels that we within Dell Technologies are experiencing. As I say, this is across both the Microsoft environment, the HCI, the Azure HCI environment, as well as from our VMware associated technologies within the Dell Technologies group. So some of the things that we are able to bring as complementary services to the Azure and the Azure Stack environment would be things around, such as CloudLink. CloudLink would talk to the key management services, for instance, within Azure and ensure that those workloads, that container technology, that data is always secured, such that should it be moved to a region that is outside of your security confidence, then that data would become locked and unable to be accessed, or actually unable to move into that, let's say, a China region or into the US region. For whatever security parameters that you describe it as requiring. It's based on policies, flexible management, and leverages encryption. So again, I would encourage you to go away and have a look at some of these complementary services. Equally, from a stack perspective, we have the likes of technology from Isilon, which is one of our cloud data lake technologies, which allows unstructured data to be brought together so as we can use data analytics against it to determine what is the data sets that are going to drive tomorrow's world. We also have ECS, our elastic cloud storage solutions, which are able to be attached to our stack so as we don't need to move massive terabytes or petabytes of data onto the cloud before we start to use AI and inquisitive technologies to determine where business value can next be identified. We can better do that within the confines of our own premise, our own data center, and then just move the pertinent data onto the cloud. Remember, obviously, the storage that you get within the Azure Stack is a finite amount, yet the data that you are using and potentially going to be driving your business could be 10 times, 100 times that amount that is able to be held in the stack. So far rather use intelligent technologies to bring the amount of data down before you propagate it up into the cloud. And similarly, from a backup perspective, a data protection perspective, Dell Technologies, through the acquisition of EMC, have brought a vast capability of data protection, not just from a backup perspective, but also from a DR perspective. And many organizations, as we're already aware, are complex things to both maintain, manage, backup, and recover from. All because we have this cloud journey ahead of us does not mean to say that we can negate or set aside the way in which we back up and maintain and make available those current systems that drive today's business. And by integrating the DPS solutions from Dell Technologies, we're able to cater for both that mess of yesterday as well as the flexibility of tomorrow. If, however, your solutions from a backup and data protection perspective require technologies such as Veeam at a software level as opposed to the Dell Technologies software, then please, by all means, continue using it. It's certainly very much supported. We've spoken about technology, and JK equally spoke to what is required from an organization and a people process perspective in order to become a cloud business going forward. And again, from a Dell Technologies perspective, that's something that we also not just embrace, but very much support. Organizations need to think about how they change their people in the process, as much about what technologies are best going to underpin their technology going forward. What we see is traditional silos of people across the network, the security, the tools, the storage, the server, and the application development. And as we go forward into a cloud model, be it a singular cloud or a multi-cloud, a hybrid cloud and model, we increasingly become service-orientated. And IT businesses and IT structures need to adapt from the way of which they operated yesterday into something that is more fitting for today's architecture, today's enterprise, and more importantly, tomorrow's cloud-driven business. And from a Dell Technologies perspective, we have 20, 25 years plus worth of experience in delivering change through virtualization and through cloud, both with Microsoft as well as with technologies such as VMware. So as we're able to think about those people changes, those organizational changes, and the impacts that they are going to have in accelerating a technology change within an organization. So taking your infrastructure teams and your application development teams, and I'm sure these are conversations that you're already having around DevOps and DevSecOps, and how you can make a continuous CI/CD process in a traditional environment, a mode 1 and a mode 2 kind of environment, as Gartner would talk to. So again, we have models, as you can see in the slide behind me, that talk to the new areas and the new skill sets that businesses and the business of IT need to give some thought and consideration to. Line of business, traditional application development, and bringing on cloud development and service management teams, and making sure that we close the gap between the application people, the enterprise consumer, and the IT environment, which have been very historically sitting behind dashboards and very insular in their view of what the enterprise actually runs and how it runs. So again, from a Dell Technologies perspective, we're able to give some thought and give consideration and have conversations with yourselves as to how best to structure your organization's IT and business needs. I'm going to touch upon some of the other reasons, again, from a Dell Technologies, or why Dell Technologies on this Microsoft Azure and Azure Stack journey that you may well be considering. One, as I already alluded to, is experience. We've been doing this within Dell for decades. It's almost to the point where when you mention Microsoft, you would probably automatically start to think of Dell. We've been driving Microsoft solutions for many, many, many years already. And again, when you enhance that again with our experiences from VMware, Dell Technologies is a safe bet with regards to a technology partner. We were able to obviously bring those learnings across those multiple clouds, across those multiple engagements with a global supply chain, and bring benefit and speed and acceleration to your cloud journey. And again, that experience and that expertise means that your time to value in your day 2 operations can be accelerated, because it's not just about landing some technology in your data center and going, now I'm connected to the cloud. But if you can't maintain it, you can't manage it, and you can't change the mindset of the organization, then it becomes an expensive investment in technology, as opposed to a vehicle for business acceleration. We also understand that the way in which organizations want to increasingly consume technology, from a CapEx to a more OpEx-orientated world, is also one of the drivers to cloud. The expectation to be able to turn things on and turn things off. So what we have within Dell and Dell Financial Services is an ability to bring a more flexible financial model to yourselves, which more mirrors and mimics the cloud consistency model of being able to subscribe to and desubscribe to technology. And again, that's in part expressed here, but again, I would encourage you to have a conversation with ourselves so as we can get down to a specific use case and a specific financial mechanism whereby you can drive the Azure Stack as well as the Azure consumption. It can be averages based. It may well be that you have a percentage of committed capacity and a variance on top of that, which you would then consume. Again, these are just examples. From a services, support, and consumption model, as I made mention, Microsoft and Dell are almost synonymous with each other. And when you work with Dell, then the experience that you get is one where you come into Dell Technologies and we address your problem. And then only should we need to back off to a Microsoft 3rd and 4th level do we need to. We have that history of working with Microsoft that, again, it's as if it was one company. So, getting to the last slide in the presentation, why Dell Technologies? We have the leadership, we have the credibility, we have the breadth of portfolio, and there's no reason that your confidence as such should not be undermined by coming to work with Dell Technologies in support of Microsoft solutions, defined by Microsoft and delivered on Dell. Thank you.